Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what inspired it. And today on the show, I've been really excited about this one, not just because it's Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix's take on the iconic Joker character, but because it's the conclusion of our trilogy of super nerd out episodes with my buddies Chad Clinton Freeman and Ryan Daugherty. We covered the movie Glass earlier this year, as well as a most anticipated movies of the year episode. And now we're back. So this is going to be a fun one. Before we get into it, I want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media at PiecingPod, and join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where I'm sure there will be a million takes, some of them good, some of them bad, about Joker. And, of course, all the other movies we love to talk about on this show. So, I think we might as well just get right into this one because it's a long one. So, let's jump into this conversation about Joker. All right, it is the conclusion to the trilogy of Ryan, Chad, Dave episodes. Guys, so glad to have you here.
Oh, I'm excited.
How you guys doing?
I was ready to see this movie and talk about it because I think this was on all of our top 10s at the start of the year, right?
Wasn't it the only one that we all three had?
No, I didn't have it on my list, actually.
You didn't have it, of all people?
I truthfully, I didn't get excited about this movie until I saw the trailer, really, because I was skeptical because Todd Phillips, I didn't think he would come up with anything, really.
That is 100% fair.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not sure. You know, we're not talking about how we feel with this movie yet. I'm not sure that Todd Phillips came up with anything for this movie. If we're being
I think there's a conspiracy theory just starting to hit the internet tonight that Joaquin Phoenix actually directed this.
I think it's pretty much his movie. I mean, so that makes sense.
Anything's possible. Well, for the listeners, Ryan and Chad were on our most awaited movies of the year episode, and then of course we also did an episode on M. Night Shyamalan's Glass, and we had decided a while back that we were going to complete this trilogy by covering Joker, because this is most people other than Chad's most awaited movie of the year, or towards the top anyway, and it's finally here. And I'm really excited to talk about it. I mean, there's going to be so much to get into with this movie. Why don't we let's start with Chad, and then we'll go to Ryan. Just general first thoughts jumping in before we start getting into puzzle pieces.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was shocked when I saw this movie. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't excited about this earlier in the year. Todd Phillips, I'm not big on him. I think I've only actually seen one full movie of his. That would be War Dogs. I didn't like it. I was disappointed with it, and I thought this was going to be more of that. So I was pleasantly shocked at how much I did like this movie. So I was very, very happy with it. I thought it was great. One of the best movies of the year, easily. So
awesome. Ryan, what about you?
I'm still just trying to get over the fact that this is essentially DC's version of Logan. Like, for all intents and purposes, this is solving, like, the same problem that Logan tried to solve for the Marvel Universe. And they just said, let's get that dude from Signs and make him be a bad guy whose, like, power is essentially to look like he went to Hot Topic at some point. But I cannot imagine being Jared Leto right now. And, like, after all the weird shit he did, and he because Jared Leto, actually, so really quick, Chad, I know you love Suicide Squad. Did you like Jared Leto as a Joker in it? Or
I didn't love Suicide Squad.
Oh, really? I thought you did. I'm sorry.
I loved pieces of it, but yeah, I thought Jared Leto was great. I thought he was a good Joker.
Based on your excitement for Birds of Prey, I did not really. Is it more just like that you liked Harley than you liked?
Oh yeah, I loved Harley. I loved Deadshot. Okay. I loved the energy of the movie, but I hated the story. So
you love bad movies.
Actually, I would 100% agree with that. I think I probably liked it less than you, but I would agree with everything you just said.
Okay.
But yeah, so
Can we just rewind for a second to Joaquin Phoenix being the actor from Signs?
That's all I'm leaving us. So we're gonna. I have
at
been
least
under.
he probably doesn't even know who River Phoenix is either. So
I know he's dead, and I think that Johnny Depp was involved in it. That's about it. So I have been. It's a recurring theme on this show that I'm underprepared for episodes, but I think we should just get it out of the way. How massively underprepared I am for this movie. I think the only thing I've ever seen Joaquin Phoenix in may have been Signs and that interview on David Letterman where he was really fucking weird.
You haven't even seen like Gladiator?
Right.
I forgot he was in that, actually.
Jesus.
I haven't seen Gladiator since I was like 10, though. So wow. I genuinely think and he gets a lot of praise, but none of it's ever like, I wanted to see that weird mock. I'm Still Here, I think it was called. I've heard amazing things about You Were Never Really Here. So apparently he's just good in movies that involve him being here or not being here.
He likes to be places.
I do agree that this should have been the trilogy of the Here movies. It totally would have fit perfect. It
100%.
So but, it goes perfect with those other two.
The bigger one that's trouble for me being underprepared for this movie. I think the only Martin Scorsese movie I've ever seen is The Departed. And this movie is basically just Todd Phillips being like, if I copied one Martin Scorsese movie, I'd be a ripoff. But if I copied two, it's art. So
okay, quick question before we get into some stuff here. So if you have only seen The Departed,
I've seen Shutter Island too. I've seen Shutter Island too.
Okay,
bam.
How does that color your reaction to his statement that comic book movies are just amusement park rides and aren't really cinema?
I think if he had, I haven't read the full thing besides the just cinema statement, but
he's just some guy.
The headline was, of course they're fucking not. So I might be on, like when he's like, oh, anyone who watches movies on their phone should like die. I'm like, all right, well, go away, old man. But when he's like, oh, it's not high cinema, I'm like, no one thought it was. Like, that's like going to the dude at McDonald's and being like, that there's like Wagyu beef out there, and they're like, yeah, I fucking know, but that's not what I'm looking for at McDonald's. Go away, Martin Scorsese.
Well, speaking of Scorsese, I think we should start this conversation off. The of course first thing that we should talk about, like just jump right in, is the Scorsese influence of this movie. It's impossible. There's no reason for us to wait for later to talk about it, but Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy are so obviously the main like DNA of this movie. This is, Todd Phillips or whoever really put this thing together basically really loves those two movies and said, how could I make that movie?
Right.
And it was like, ooh, I know, I'm going to make a Joker origin story and make it that movie. So are we all fans? I mean, aside from Ryan, I guess me and Chad, are we fans of these movies?
I love Taxi Driver. Always have. So, King of Comedy is one of those that I appreciate. Never really loved. Of course, most of Scorsese's outside of Taxi Driver, I've never loved. I mean, even Raging Bull or Goodfellas. I mean, Taxi Driver is the only one that I'm just hold up with very high regard. So
yeah, well, Taxi Driver is actually, I mean, it might be my favorite like pre 1980s movie. Like I've always really loved that movie.
Right.
It is just absolutely fantastic. And The King of Comedy, I'm sure I saw, like, it's one of those movies I always talk about, like older movies that I know I saw, but I couldn't really remember. I just watched it 2 weeks ago in the lead up to this, and I liked it a lot. I thought it was pretty great. And it was so funny watching it now, like kind of for the first time, not really the first time, because like I said, I'm sure I'd seen it, but just like beat for beat, I was like, oh my God, this is like, I know exactly what I'm getting myself into. Like, there's so much of this is what I expected Joker to be, and then it ended up being quite a lot of it. And of course the whole kind of stunt casting of Robert De Niro as the late night talk show host now is really pretty sweet and clever and fun. I don't know if he's exactly right for the role necessarily. He's kind of old and stuff, but But he definitely, you know, it's a cool thing for fans of Scorsese movies. That's for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Yeah, I mean, it was when I was in college. I watched like every Scorsese movie I could find. So I don't remember a lot about it. I remember enjoying it, but yeah, I hadn't seen it in forever. So
Yeah. Well, Ryan, what about you? What are your thoughts on these movies that you haven't seen, but you probably have thoughts on them anyway?
Oh, absolutely. I have been like I furiously Wikipedia'd both these movies after hearing was an exact ripoff because I wanted to know what it was a ripoff of, and I had like long ago considered like Joker movie. Anything gets spoiled for me, I don't care. Like I'm not going into this for like anything other than seeing how it unravels.
Sure.
And I could definitely see it. There's a lot of like there are definitely a lot of tropes I like in other movies that are strong homages to Scorsese that like originated in Taxi Driver and stuff like that. So it's not like this is the first time I've seen anything remotely in the field before. In terms for like how beat for beat it is, I don't really, have any context for that besides like, oh yeah, this seems like a part that was in the Wikipedia. It was interesting though because some of the scenes that I sort of thought like, oh, this is because it's taken from a Batman comic, were also actually just taken from King of Comedy. So it wasn't like a totally out of left field choice to rip that off. There definitely is some precedent for some of the plot points of King of Comedy being tied into like Joker's backstory in some of the comics.
Now that's interesting because we're teasing you for not having seen these movies, but at the same time, I obviously don't know anything about comic books, and I haven't read any of these comics. I don't know the stories, and I'm sure that there is some precedent within some of the versions of these Joker origin stories and Batman stories where some of this is coming from. I know I've read that there's a lot of things that are like twisted and like taking bits and pieces and mixing them together, but I certainly wouldn't know where any of those things are from.
yeah, and evidently there was a Joker comic book where he appeared on a talk show, and there was
he kills the entire audience.
Yeah, and there was a sex therapist on the show with him, and he actually kisses her. So evidently, a lot of that was very much in line with that comic.
That was where I was wondering if it was going to go in the direction of the comics, because in the comics he like goes on a talk show and then just murders the entire audience, and like it was in a very comic book way. I think it was one of those like he released laughing gas that kills you into the vents for the show, and I was like, that would be a really weird turn for the movie to take, right? Like that it's been super grounded, and then suddenly Joaquin steps up and goes, haha, I'm actually a chemist and have also made a chemical that can make you laugh to death, and I've put it in the audience, and the next 5 minutes is just Marc Maron laughing himself to death.
That would
doing
be
what he
pretty
did
dark.
worked a little better for this kind of movie.
Yeah, that I think, and we'll get into a lot of stuff as we're getting through this conversation. But I think if it had gone in that direction, I think it was wise that only one person was shot to death or killed in any way, because if he had just gone on a straight up killing spree, I think it would have it would have made some of the criticisms of this movie that I quite frankly think are bullshit, that it's like glorifies violence and all that kind of stuff. And we'll get into that later, but I think it would have really made that point for the people who claim that.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it's really not. It's just I think it's a sick person who can't get any help and has finally had enough. So we will get into some puzzle pieces now, aside from those first two. Why don't we start with you, Ryan? What do you got for your first one?
So a lot of what I was thinking about this movie the entire time is, in a weird way, I feel like I feel like it feels very pretentious to call this movie the My Generation's anything, but it really does kind of feel like it's my generation's Fight Club. For all the wrong reasons. Like the worst parts of Fight Club about like, Fight Club was like an it was a movie with a mentally ill protagonist who is an unreliable narrator, and it was like an exploration of like toxic masculinity and like what a man is supposed to be, and how like I'm fed up with society. There's a better way to do it. I've transcended it because I understand certain rules about like the world that other people don't. And a lot of people didn't necessarily pick up that Fight Club was a criticism of some of those beliefs, right? Like, so the same kinds of people I feel like who like idolize Tyler Durden, they're going to get a lot of the same things out of this Joker movie. Right down to the fact that what kind of struck me the most about this movie, that is always my favorite thing about Joker in movie portrayals of him, is in a lot of portrayals, the Jack Nicholson stuff like that, he's kind of just a gangster, but they touch on it a little with Heath Ledger's performance, and they touch on it a lot here, that like Joker is kind of a cult leader. He has people who work for him to do bad things, but he also like gets people who just like so firmly believe in his like sheer force of personality that he kind of just leads people to like dismantle the world the way he wants to, which is like straight up Tyler Durden.
One of the reviews that I read, I can't remember which one it was, but they described him as a folk hero.
Yeah, I think
it's great.
That's definitely it's weird that you could still draw this back to like like an Occupy Wall Street kind of like hero, but it's like it's almost in my mind like an alternate reality of like the way things could have gone if someone took it a little further, the same way that like Fight Club was kind of the same thing against like big consumerism rather than big capitalists.
Sure. Chad, this is a very good question. Are you a Fight Club fan? I don't know.
I gave the crap to Ryan for not seeing Taxi Driver. I've actually never watched Fight Club. I've seen bits of it, but I've never watched it. I know
feel
exactly
like that's
what you're going to
you'd
say.
Hate.
Huh?
I feel like that's a movie you'd hate, but
probably.
I think, given that it's one of my favorite movies, I think it's reasonable to assume that Chad would hate it.
I loved Fight Club at the time, and I haven't seen it in a long time. I've been wondering lately how it would age, especially with like all of like the memeability of like the we live in the society thing and all that. And it's like, would I just be kind of rolling my eyes at the message of the movie, or would it still hold up? Because I mean, I freaking loved it back then.
There was a Fight Club 2 that came out like 2 years ago, and that like I'm really scared to revisit that, because Fight Club is definitely one of those ones that like I've read the book, I read the movie, I watched the movie, I love them both. But I'm kind of in the same boat you're in. Like, I definitely do think Fight Club holds up from the bits I've rewatched, but there's no way it will ever reach the level of the, like, oh, I was younger and I first discovered the, like, edgy subversions of Fight Club kind of thing. And there's no way that reading a comic book sequel that was released 15 years later is going to help anything.
Yeah, I can only imagine it would take some of the wrong cues for continuing some of that story, but I don't know.
So since you brought up Fight Club though, because I know the goings on of that movie, basically what happens, it's like a twist and that sort of thing. But so you basically got a character that isn't really there the whole time, right?
Sure.
So it's a lot of it is basically in the guy's head.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing. So we'll go ahead and jump into that, because my way I saw this Joker movie, I saw it that none of it actually happened. He's not the real Joker. Arthur Fleck is not the Joker. This is just some guy that's in an insane asylum that imagined all of this. Maybe he read a comic book, maybe he saw something, and he put all of this together in his head, that none of this actually happened. The whole movie, none of it happened. Which which I'll go ahead and throw in my puzzle piece, and that's American Psycho. Which I've always seen American Psycho that same way, that none of it actually happened. He just wrote it in his book. Now, you talk to other people, of course, there was a sequel that doesn't connect with that. They went in a different direction, so that doesn't really count. But there are people to this day that I talk with them, and they didn't see it that way. But that's how I saw this movie as well, that it basically all happened in his head. All of the female characters, if you notice, all of them except his mother were black women, and his doctor at the end was a black woman. I think he was just basically kind of using her to make up these other women that were in his life.
Yeah,
That's
and they all
interesting.
kind of symbolically represented frustrations he had with
Right. With
stuff.
women
Yeah.
in general. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh, I like that.
That
And
I will say that was actually consistently my least favorite part of the movie was any of the did that really happen or did that not
Right.
parts. Usually I like that in movies, but like every the fact that the picture was signed by Thomas Wayne. So maybe his mom wasn't crazy. Maybe Thomas did just forge the adoption papers to cover his ass, or like maybe the whole him getting pulled out of the car thing didn't happen and it's just him hallucinating that in the like normally in movies I'm fine with that. I didn't really care in either direction about the woman next door not knowing him thing, but every other like the final scene, him dancing with the bloody shoes, being like, oh, this is almost definitely an imagination kind of thing. Like that just didn't do anything for me. And I don't know what it was that like he fumbled the ball on. But like every part of that movie where it was like that. So like by that logic, Chad, as you've described the movie, I hate the entire film now.
Well, see, that's what made me love it. I love that
Sure.
about it because the other movie it reminded me of that came to mind was High Tension, which is a movie that I love. I think I've mentioned before. But so yeah, you've got an unreliable narrator basically, and you have to watch like it's always fun to go back and watch a movie like that because then if it's done right, you can see things that you didn't see the first time, and it makes sense because you're like, but that's not really happening, and it makes sense. But I so want to see this movie again and see if it does play like the whole time with that expectation of this is just all in his head. So
the one thing about that open-endedness of that ending, which when I watched it, I actually did not take it as open-ended at all. I just kind of took it as he is the Joker, and that's all there is to it. And then as I thought about it a little bit, I was like, oh well, actually, he could not be, And then I realized that was that whole theory I had from the get-go of this not being a Joker movie. But I think the one thing that's going to really drive that home is if they hopefully never do a sequel to this, which we all hope. If they don't, it's going to keep that open-ended forever, and that's going to be kind of awesome, I think. That's going to be the perfect way to end it if that happens.
Unless I was thinking about this because I was like, they can't ever do a sequel, but then I was like, Blair Witch 2, they can do a sequel.
No.
It's all, they can just go more with the performance art and the meta-ness of this movie that he is just a guy that was in an insane asylum,
Phoenix.
and you open with him surrounded like Batman comic books,
Yeah.
and then he gets out of the insane asylum and it picks up from there.
Actually becoming the Joker at that point, yeah.
No, but the character is Joaquin Phoenix in the movie, though.
I don't think that whether or not it happened and whether or not he is the Joker are the same point, though, right? Like, I do like to think that the riot at the end did happen and that him in the asylum was like, a couple days later, he got like arrested by the cops because he's, this version of the Joker is not particularly clever or a criminal mastermind or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So like realistically, 5 minutes into him dancing on the car hood, the cops would have just shown up and tased him in my mind. But I still think that, he is the person that 30 years from now, the Joker will like draw on as like a Guy Fawkes mask kind of analog, right? Like I don't have any delusion that he's the same Joker that will be the Joker in the Robert Pattinson movie or something like that. Even if they were explicitly in the same universe, which as far as I'm aware, they're not. I still think timing wise, Joker as a character, one of his most important traits is that he only exists to counter the Batman. In any comic where like Batman goes away or dies or retires, Joker just shrugs and goes back to being a normal dude. Like he only exists to counter the Batman. So I do really like this twist. Well, it's not necessarily a twist because some of the other movies have done it before, that in a way, this Joker created the Batman by inspiring these riots. And therefore, in the future, that is inspiring this kid to go on to become the Batman who will inspire someone else to inevitably become the Joker. So I like that little. It's a bit less heavy-handed than Jack Nicholson being the one who shot Batman's parents, which I've never been a huge fan of.
Yeah.
But this feels like symbolically a little better to me.
So I guess I'll go with my first puzzle piece. But yeah, no, I'm gonna go with the first Taxi Driver inspired movie with Joaquin Phoenix playing a loner with mental health issues whose life has been plagued by violence, and that is You Were Never Really Here, which I think is really important to bring up because it is essentially such a similar concept, and to have Joaquin Phoenix in it, and it's such a testament to how insanely talented he is that they are two completely different takes on such a similar story, such a similar character, with a similar trajectory. I mean, at least for the beginning, and then You Were Never Really Here goes in a totally different direction, but yeah, and I think it's also a fantastic movie that has, centered around a fantastic performance. Both are movies that I don't think would work as well without such a fantastic central performance. They really are performance-based movies.
Definitely. Yeah, and he was like such a badass in that movie, and now here he is, this scrawny,
so meek. And
yeah. But yeah, he took care of his mother in that movie as well. I mean, so there's so many similarities. Yeah, that's like I mean, really, Ryan had said he's been in a lot of hero movies. I mean, really, the Joker movie it should have been called The Joker Was Not Here or something. I don't know. Some sort of
yeah, that would lean into that. That would lean into that twist, too.
Right? Yeah. The Joker was here, or the Joker was never here. I don't know.
Oh God, if it was Jared Leto, though, it would be with like WUZ. The Joker was here.
I would love to see the evolution from that Joker into Jared Leto's, where like, assuming it is the same person who just like ages really well and ends up looking like Jared Leto, and like after all that, he's like, I could go for some tattoos now, and starts like,
God. Oh my God. Well, Ryan, what do you got for your next one?
So I actually wouldn't be surprised if maybe you guys had this one as well, but the Michael Douglas movie, Falling Down.
Yes.
Sure.
Which, that's kind of just a movie about like how a really bad day can just break anyone.
Sure.
And this is going to tie into something I'm going to talk about later down the line with another puzzle piece. But it really is just kind of a movie about life piling up on a person who, is sympathetic in a way, and you can watch Falling Down, and I think at every step of the way, as he slowly gets to where he gets at the end of the movie, of going from like, I'm just a business dude walking around, to like, I'm waving a gun around at police threatening to kill people and like trying to almost shooting up a Burger King and stuff. Every step of that logic, you're sort of like, I wouldn't necessarily make those decisions, but I kind of get it, dude. And I felt the same way with a lot of the Joker stuff of like, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts of like each individual step. You're kind of like, if I was already in his state of mind and this thing happened to me, it's not crazy that he acts the way he reacts the way he reacts to it. But then like the accumulation of that, you go from maybe a good guy who's got some bad luck and life isn't really fair to like utter psychopath who's also probably kind of feeling very self-righteous at this point and believing that like the world owes them whatever it is that they're paying forward to the world in terms of punishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, and this is the thing that I like the most about this movie, Joker. I think, I know a lot of critics disagree with me and, have said that Todd Phillips does a really bad job here and doesn't really drive home the progression of the character and everything. But I felt like you really feel this guy's like struggle and pain and like just the fact that nothing can go right. And then, added on top of, the trying to navigate the mental health industry in this country. And I think it's just such a real portrait of everything that's gone wrong lately. And I think it handles it so well. And I'm shocked to say that because I certainly would never have expected a Todd Phillips movie to be, you know, handling it that way. But I think it does such a good job of showing that character that's just being beaten down by every single external factor imaginable.
No, I agree with you too, and that's the thing is like you know, talking about Taxi Driver, and I mean that's the thing with Taxi Driver. You know, it's a man with mental illness, and it's not. Not only that, it's a man who's
Yeah.
isolated, and that's the same thing here. And then with mental illness, when you add in the isolation, it really, you know, fucks
Mhm.
with a person, you know.
Yeah.
It really warps their mind. They don't know how to actually, you know, function at all. And like one of the here's the thing, this movie I thought was actually a lot funnier than I
Mhm.
thought it was going to be. And it's funny because it's done in a, I feel, a tasteful way, as opposed to some movies where it could be about mental illness and it's like not quite
Sure.
as tasteful. But I mean, still, the part where he, you know, he's on the elevator and the woman's with the little girl and she does the thing with the gun to her head, and then he he later's walking out and he's like, "Hey," and he thinks, you know, he's being cute and flirting or whatever, and he puts the finger to his head and pulls the trigger like he's shooting himself, and she's
I
just
have
like,
never
That was
related
great.
so
it's
strongly
like
to a
so
character
hilarious.
as that moment. Like when a like
It
like
was
when a
just
girl will like say something to me, and then like 5 minutes later, I'll think of something funny in response to it, and she's completely moved on. I'll be like, "Hey, yeah, that weather, right?" The girl's just like, "What the fuck?"
which reminds me a lot of Taxi Driver, when he goes out on the date with Sybil Shepherd, and you want to go to a movie? They go to a movie. He takes her to a porno,
Yeah.
and to him this is fine, and she's like, "What the fuck is this?" So you know, I mean, I just think though the mental illness in the movie was handled very, very well, and it's also, though, it works in a funny way that you wouldn't think it was, because it's not like making fun of the character, it's not making fun of the mental illness. Which I'm going to kind of go to what would be my next puzzle piece, because it
Mhm.
ties in with this a movie I love. And it's about mental illness as well. It is very much influenced by Taxi Driver. That's Observe and Report,
Nice.
the Seth Rogen movie, which I love, love, love. And of course, that movie, the mental illness is more of a joke. It's more of, um, it's hard to explain the difference. It's not necessarily mean spirited, but I mean, I rewatched it because I thought of this movie, so I actually rewatched it last night. I still love that movie, and there are some of those parts in it as well where he's trying to, like, you know, fit in, like do what he's supposed to be doing. Like he walks up and Anna Faris, her character, and this other guy are laughing, and he comes up and he's just laughing. He doesn't know what they're
Yeah.
laughing about, and he's like, "Oh yeah, what was funny?" And it was just like, you know, is that same kind of thing of him just trying to fit in. He doesn't know how. But Observe and Report, you know, again, you've got this guy who lives with his mom, who he's just you know, trying to kind of figure out where he fits in the
Sure.
world, and kind of probably doesn't. Same with Joker, doesn't really, you know, feel like he exists, like he has a purpose or anything. Of course, he thinks he's going to be a cop. So in that one, you had that trope of he had this goal to attain and then he couldn't reach it. Where in this one, he never really had that. He had no purpose, no goal to, you know, to try
Sure.
to reach. But there was something about this one that seemed more sincere, just with the way that the mental illness was handled.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, it really does balance that really well. I mean, because like you said, there is quite a bit of funny in this movie, And I mean, it is a big. I mean, even though it's so dark and everything, it is a big blockbuster movie based on a comic book property. I mean, it kind of has to have some laughs in it and stuff like that. But I think it's balanced really well. And even though it's pretty dark and serious for the majority of the movie, which again is another thing that I could see a lot of people complaining about, is how serious it is. But people complain if it's too funny. They complain if it's too serious. They complain no matter what. So that's just the way it is with movies. That was okay, so that was yours, Chad. So I guess it's up to me now for my next puzzle piece. I'm gonna go with one I'm guessing was also on Chad's list, but I'm gonna steal it, and that is Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it kind of goes along again with a lot of these things. I mean, we're kind of just we're talking about all of these great movies of people just kind of losing it and and just like
Right.
going down this path of destruction and just letting the world get the best of them, and and getting to a place of just where violence ends up being the end result, just like insane violence. And Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Nightcrawler, of course, has a different kind of mental illness, certainly a more violent from the start character, a more troubling character from the get-go. Someone who probably was never
Right.
going to get any form of help or never want any kind of help. But it's a totally different kind of thing there. But I still think that kind of story though is inspirational here for a movie like
Well,
Joker.
definitely, and then also with that character, totally isolated. He's obsessed with you know
Mm-hmm.
TV and
Oh,
media,
that's
the
true. Yeah.
news. Um, yeah, and uh, there's just that character too, like that movie. I love that movie. I think that movie is very, very funny, very
Sure.
dark comedy. And I think Joker, has some of that same dark comedy, like Observe and Report, like Nightcrawler. They're all totally different movies, but I mean, even Taxi Driver, there's some weird dark
Sure.
humor in there. It's just less. It's just less. But I think, yeah, totally. Nightcrawler is another one, definitely inspired by Taxi
Sure.
Driver as well. I think it's what's so interesting is that this movie is a perfect example, I think, of being a product of being inspired by other things that were inspired by other things that were actually inspired by something else to begin with. There's like this loop of art imitating life and art imitating art and then life imitating art and then
Sure.
this movie. It's very much a meme in that way.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Absolutely. Ryan, what do you think? Nightcrawler and also Observe and Report.
So I haven't actually seen it before, but a lot of the commentary I've heard on like from reviews I've read on Jake Gyllenhaal's character in that movie
Mhm.
remind me a lot of the kind of things I heard people saying about Joaquin Phoenix about 2/3 of the way through the film and from then on. Like kind of I
Mhm.
think you called out the fact which I wasn't actually positive of, that Jake kind of starts out being more of a piece of shit to begin with and doesn't have as much of that downward trajectory.
Sure.
But I definitely can see the comparisons. And there are even interesting little quirks, in just like how he controls his body. Like I've heard the whole like that in Nightcrawler, Jake never blinks on camera kind of thing. And that is always like what I've thought of when I think of that character, is just that like as a trait, he's like, I'm never gonna blink when the camera is on me, and all these little things that like Joaquin would do to physicalize the character's like detachment from the world, like the fact that except for the final time he runs, even when he doesn't have clown shoes on, he always runs like he's wearing his clown shoes and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Just the little things. Or the fact that once he puts the face paint on, he stops laughing accidentally until it goes back to the
Ooh, I
end of the
didn't
movie
notice
when he's not
that.
wearing it anymore. As soon as he puts the face paint on for the final time, he only starts laughing on purpose. And it's the same kind of laugh, but the timing is always synced up that it's actually him laughing. It's not, And it's just those like little things. Every time Joaquin clenches his jaw, every time he does the certain things with his shoulder blades. I'm not usually a guy who really cares about method acting or even honestly that much. Usually to me, acting, I kind of only really care about it if it's terms of like delivering dramatic dialogue, and beyond that, I'm a pretty easy guy to please. But this was very much a like physically inhabiting a role, so that like every ounce of this guy oozes what is wrong with him, and you can just look at him in a screenshot and know what's going on. I've 100% had that when I've looked at like clips from Nightcrawler as well. Like exactly what state of mind like Psycho Jake Gyllenhaal is in those bits and stuff.
Well, the other thing though that again that's so interesting about this one and the difference between Nightcrawler is that Nightcrawler again, he's so he has this ambition and he has this drive and he has this fearlessness, whereas this character, he doesn't have that, and that's what makes it like I think grounds it more real. I think,
yeah,
and makes him more of a believable character. Because I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, but there's definitely that contrast with that one, and then even like I was saying, Observe and Report as well.
Yeah.
Because this guy, he has absolutely. He's just kind of like a fish, on the sidewalk, kind of flopping around.
Yeah, it ties in really well. There, like I think in the Heath Ledger movie, he straight up says, "Look, man, I'm just a dog chasing cars here," and like that really is kind of like Heath is even. Joaquin is even less forceful than that. He's like, yeah, a fish flopping around. He's like a feather just like floating on a river that happens to be going to a shit show. Like he's so passive, which actually ties in really well to what my next puzzle piece was going to be. Which, in a way, this movie to me is almost like an opposite of. I don't know if you guys have seen, I think it's a Bobcat Goldthwait movie, God Bless America, which is one of those very. It's been done by a bunch of people, kind of just like the I snap because I hate society, I'm going to kill everyone type of movie. I know Uwe Ball has a Postal movie that's a similar premise, but to me, very specifically, for anyone who hasn't seen God Bless America, it starts with like, I'm sick of celebrities and the rich people. I'm just going to kill everyone kind of thing. And it's just him driving around killing reality stars. I think maybe some politicians. And it was very, it felt like the natural progression of where the Joker movie would have gone if it kept going for longer, except the crucial difference is just like Chad said, Joaquin's guy didn't have ambition, right? He like accidentally became this person. I don't believe that if all of this movie really happened when he inevitably gets out of Arkham, I can't see him becoming a criminal mastermind with a goal. He's just there to kind of do what he does, and that happens to cause chaos.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that he was going to kill himself on the
100%.
set, but then changed his mind last set?
I think he changed his mind when Murray started when Murray started in front of him.
Yeah,
I think so too. Which I just think adds to what you were just saying there about not having that ambition to really do all this big stuff.
That kind of was the moment where he almost got some ambition, but his ambition was essentially just nihilism of like, oh, bad things must be funny because why would the world let this many bad things happen to me and force me to keep laughing? So like it must actually just be that these things are very funny, and my mom told me I'm here to make the world funnier, so I'm gonna murder everybody. Like it's a very like again, it's like, all right, I can kind of see the steps of logic you took there. They're insane, but even then, he doesn't have like a pointed goal or anything like that.
I think Arthur Fleck would be a fan of MC Random and Jewish Dave.
100%. He would still dance the exact same way to the murder music though. Like he'd be I love that it was like half ballet dancing and half like pelvic thrusting. It was such a weird combination of dancing of like graceful and then him just going, "Oh, suck it," while he's the Joker.
I loved it. To that puzzle piece, I'm trying to remember if I ever actually saw that movie. I remember it. Chad, you're a fan of that movie, right?
It's it not really a fan, but
Okay.
yeah, it's like you said, it's one of those. There are a lot of those movies, and you had mentioned the Postal movie. That movie's actually really horrible, by the way. Don't watch that one. But Uwe Boll had another movie. I think it was called Rampage.
Yeah, he had Rampage. Is
Yeah.
Rampage the one where he builds the suit of armor?
Yeah, Rampage is the good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rampage is the good one. So
I haven't seen that one, but I've heard watching it as a dark comedy is like the most likely way for me to like enjoy an Uwe movie, which is why I haven't seen it yet. To be honest, I like to keep that anger fueling me.
That's his best movie easily, I would say. I think he made like several sequels.
There's like 3 of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, all those types of movies. But I think like a movie more like Postal is a little more, or Rampage is more just he's fed up with the world, which is very similar to Joker. But like God Bless America has such a pointed message, which is the exact opposite of the intention of Joker. But he coincidentally ends up like hating and killing the same kind of people. So it's interesting to see 2 paths, do different journeys, same destination.
Interesting. I like it. Well, what do you got next, Chad?
Well, I was going to touch on. We were mentioning the dancing. You know what it reminded me of? The clips of Charles Manson in interviews when he gets up and starts dancing. Of course, his is a lot more like erratic and like hyper, but it kind of gave me that sort of feeling, and along with that, which I was thinking about the performance art side of this, the TV side of this. I just think that like those old interviews with like Manson, and then also just in general, like these old TV show, like late night television, especially like weird people that used to be on like David Letterman and such, like Emo Phillips and like Pee Wee Herman when he was very, very weird, and then even like Gerardo and Donahue and Jerry Springer, even when he would have people like Gigi Allen on. Of course, Andy Kaufman is another one of these weirdos. Sure. Andy Kaufman, his movements a little bit when he does his little dancing too. So you kind of take like these performance art people with like, criminal, insane person like Charles Manson, and I think just I don't know what to label this, but I see this as a puzzle piece.
I think this might be the third time I've talked about Charles Manson on the podcast with Dave. Which is weird, seeing as I didn't do the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood episode, which means we've still just brought up Charles Manson in other movies regardless.
Hey, it happens. What can you do? But I like that puzzle piece, Chad. That's fun.
So yeah, I would say it's just like performance art, and then also, Manson and,
yeah, just like those weird, weird late night talk show guests from like the old days of the late night talk shows. I dig it. I like it.
Yeah, in the good daytime talk shows like Donahue and Gerardo, and where Jerry Springer actually had people on there.
Sure. All right, I'm gonna go with another one here. It's actually my last one that I've got. But the movie Christine, the one, not the Stephen one? King. No, not the Stephen King movie.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, no, the movie with Rebecca Hall about Christine Chubbuck, the woman who committed suicide live on TV.
Oh, it's funny. Yeah. I was talking about that thing to the people I saw the movie with. I didn't realize there was a movie about that though. But that was like the first thing I thought of was like, and that's why we have delays on live TV now.
Yeah, right. And of course, it goes a different direction here. And of course, that was based on a true story, something that actually happened. But it's a really good movie though. Really, really dark.
I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that's what that movie was about.
Yeah.
I'll have to watch that one now. I think it's even on Hulu or something. I've seen it all the time. I'm like, what the hell is this? So
yeah, I saw it back when it first came out a long time ago. Like, what was that, like 2006? I want to say, but yeah, no, it's a good movie though.
Well, to go with that one, the movie I thought of was Network, which I think that might have been in the early '80s. I wasn't allowed to see it Came out. It was on VHS, and I was not allowed to watch it. And then I remember I snuck it and saw the end of it, which of
Ryan
course
wasn't allowed to watch it either because he wasn't born yet.
It was tricky. My parents were draconian like that.
So with that one, you know that movie, right, Ryan?
I know I have read the plot of it on Wikipedia before, and I have zero recollection of it. Like, I do know that it has come up before.
So it's this guy that basically he says, I'm going to kill myself on TV next week, and this helps like jump up the ratings of this show, which he's like being forced, I think, forced into retirement or something like that. And so he really is going to kill himself, but then he becomes like this cult figure that everybody joins in to watch, and they get real high ratings. And I forget exactly what happens, but the studio ends up killing him at the end on TV.
Oh,
so yeah, so it's a pretty infamous movie from back. I think it was in the early 80s when it came out.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was not allowed to watch it when it first came out.
Yeah, that's another one of these classics that I remember watching, specifically remember watching back in high school, but I do not really remember it that well. I really should rewatch that. It sounds great, and I know it. Like I said, I know I saw it, but I just don't remember it. So what do you got next, Ryan? You got another one?
Yeah, I came in here with exactly one puzzle piece, which was Fight Club, and I've just been making these other ones up as I go.
That's why we bring you on this show.
But I feel like the last one I'm going to do is it wouldn't be fair not to acknowledge it, which is just the comic, which is the closest to the source inspiration, which is Batman the Killing Joke, which is really the first comic that sort of tried to give the Joker an origin story. And his origin story was that he was a failed comedian who had a shitty family life. But one of the recurring themes of the Killing Joke is the concept of that Joker's claim, which comes up in some of the other movies. Heath Ledger touches on it a few times when he's like, oh, chaos is like gravity. You just need a little push. Again, I mentioned I would touch on this again later, but Joker's whole thing in that comic is the only thing standing between a good guy and a bad guy is one really bad day. Essentially, the concept of everyone has a breaking point, and if you're a quote-unquote good guy, it's just because you haven't been through the ringer enough yet. And over the course of that concept, over the course of that comic, basically Joker tries to give people that bad of a day to try turn them, and he's proven wrong, luckily, over the course of the comic. But this movie is just the distillation of that, of just like, it's a movie that's got a guy getting literally kicked while he's down twice within a half hour, right? That's a thing that doesn't actually happen to people. It's a metaphor, and yet it literally happened to him twice within a half hour. It is just, that was the movie that kind of established that maybe, that was the comic that kind of established that maybe Joker just was a dude who snapped one day because of how he was pushed. So, this obviously takes that in a very different direction. It doesn't use any of that as, it doesn't really take much from that besides the concept of bad day stand-up comedian. And even in that comic itself, it's kind of implied that that's not actually the Joker's true backstory. That's just what he says or thinks at the time because he is completely Looney Tunes. But I think more than anything else, if you had to pick a comic of where is this coming from, you'd have to give it to The Killing Joke, which is actually I have not read. I have it, I think, and I've read about it a bunch, but I don't think I've actually read the entire thing start to finish.
And now you've podcasted about it.
I've never read it. I did see the animated version though.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I was kind of leaving that out because it's not the best adaptation.
Yeah, it was not it was not my favorite. I would say that.
I think that's a good way to put it. That was not something worth Mark Hamill coming out of retirement for.
I've seen a picture of the cover. That's about it. So there
you go. Is that the really famous one with him holding the camera sideways?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's a very iconic, like, the image of the Joker.
Sure. So, Chad, how many more do you have? I'm guessing about 12, 13.
I got a couple big ones I can touch on, and then I can throw a bunch of other ones out there.
Rapid
Oh,
fire,
well,
baby. Let's
yeah,
go.
let's do this.
Okay.
Let's do
Here's
this.
here's a movie I hadn't thought of in forever, and for whatever reason, this movie made me think of it. Throw Mama from the Train, the Danny DeVito directed dark comedy. And again, maybe it's the dark comedy of this movie is what really touched on that. But I know Ryan hasn't seen this. Throw Mama from the Train. Danny DeVito's character. He takes care of his mother, who is the old woman from Goonies, which I don't know if you've seen Goonies.
I have not. Unfortunately,
Anyway.
that's the number one. Besides Back to the Future, Goonies is the number one movie I get shit about for having not seen.
Okay, so anyways, Danny DeVito thinks that he wants to kill his mother, who he takes care of, and she basically belittles him all the time. And he's in this writing class that Billy Crystal teaches, and it talks with him about, because he's trying to write this murder mystery, and he's telling him about, hey, take my ex-wife for example. I hate her. I want to kill her, but I can't kill her because I have too much of a motive. You got to take away the motive, and you got to have an alibi. And so he gets in his. This is a takeoff of a Hitchcock movie, by the way. So he gets in his head, hey, I'm going to kill his wife, and then he's going to kill my mom. So he goes to kill the wife, and comes back and he's like, hey, it's done. I killed your wife. Now you got to kill my mom. And so that's the movie of Billy Crystal not wanting to kill the mom, feeling like, oh, should I kill his mom? And I mean, I rewatched it because, again, I for whatever reason I thought of this movie, and it holds up. It is great. Danny DeVito directed it, and there's just something about the dark humor, and then also the fact that I think that you've got this man who he takes care of the mother. She's a lot meaner in Throw Mama from the Train to him than this mother is, but still that mother belittles him and does not hold him up or help him in any way. She basically
doesn't really support
down.
him or anything. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I mean, so I mean that was actually one of the big ones. And again, though, like, I mean, I thought this movie was really funny. So a lot of my pieces came from this area of like dark comedy. I mean, most of them, I think.
Yeah, it's like a pitch black comedy for sure.
Now, a serious one that I did think of though was the assassination of Richard Nixon, the Sean Penn movie. Which I hadn't seen that one in forever, and I looked for it on streaming and I couldn't find it because I did want to rewatch it. So the assassination of Richard Nixon is supposedly the true life story that actually inspired Taxi Driver. Samuel Bick, I think's his name. He hated. He was like, down on his luck, had this whole downward spiral, and he became obsessed with wanting to kill Richard Nixon. And I think his plan in real life was to hijack a plane and crash it into the White House. So anyway, it's a great movie. Sean Penn is fantastic, but evidently that was one of the true stories that inspired Taxi Driver. And then I was actually looking on that today, and then I had forgot about. There was actually another story. The guy that shot George Wallace in '72 when Wallace was getting ready to run for the Democratic nomination. He was actually shot by a guy that his name was Arthur Bremer. And I thought that was interesting that his name was Arthur. So anyway, again, though, like I said earlier about how this is kind of a meme where these films these real events that inspired Taxi Driver, and then the Taxi Driver inspired all these other things, and then it's like this whole loop of like art and inspiration and true crime.
And isn't that kind of the point of the show?
Yeah, I think so. I think
it's kind of cool.
Yeah, because that's the other thing. You guys don't probably remember this either, but the guy that tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan, he was obsessed with Taxi Driver. Hinckley. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, there's just a lot of that stuff. All of this. I could understand a bit of hysteria if these were the reasons why people were getting hysterical about this movie, but nobody's bringing any of this stuff up. The only thing they bring up as far as any of this true crime stuff, I don't know if y'all read this, but I didn't even know of this one, but there was one called the Death Wish Gunman, that it was a guy on a subway that killed like 4 people, and evidently they were all black guys. But at the time when it first happened, New York kind of was behind the guy because these were like, he was like going to get robbed, and he shot these people. But then come to find out, he was actually a racist that was trying to just kill black guys. And so then all of a sudden, nobody's like, no, we don't support him anymore. But anyway, so that was actually one of the things that I actually saw anybody mention. And all I can figure is that because I remember reading beforehand that this Joker movie was racist. Of course, it was obviously people that hadn't seen the movie. And all I can figure,
one of the people I walked out of the theater with did claim it was racist, and I really did not want to engage in that conversation.
Okay.
I will 100% say that, and I am putting them on blast a little bit, but they 100% were like, yeah, that movie's racist. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't get that at all.
Yeah.
We are 3 white guys, so I mean,
Yeah.
but
Right.
but I don't get it at all. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really, not racist or sexist. You had these, like I said, besides him, the actual like decent characters in the movie were like black women. I mean,
Yeah.
for the most part. So,
Yeah.
I don't
By the
know.
way, can I just say really quick, when you were talking about some of those true life stories,
Right.
for a second I thought The Guy Who Shot George Wallace was a movie title.
Hey, it could be.
Yeah, it would work. So yeah, no, those are that's good though, and I think is that it as far as movies?
Well, I will say this. I did think of A Clockwork Orange and Natural Born Killers. Which here's the thing with A Clockwork Orange, which of course Natural Born Killers was big time inspired by that movie. But
Sure.
this one I think is definitely more in line with Natural Born Killers, because Natural Born Killers was, well, the way I saw it was that A Clockwork Orange is kind of more about uh, people are going to do what they want to do regardless. You can't brainwash people, basically, and people are just going to function the way they want to. And then Natural Born Killers is more of, well, wait a minute, maybe the media does, encourage, crime, and maybe it's involved with crime, it, like, supports it and glamorizes it, and maybe that kind of eggs, criminals on. Whereas this one, though, I feel that this one, it's really like, bring your own message. And I think everybody that watches it sees a different movie because it does not take a stance. It doesn't take a
Absolutely.
stance because Todd Phillips is an idiot and he doesn't know what kind of movie he even made.
I think that's
what I
very
think.
true. That's so 100% accurate.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually brilliant despite him.
That is a really, really good point. I think you're so right, because I really think, like we said back when we were first starting this conversation, we were talking about Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy. I really feel like he just saw those movies and was like, I want to do that. But I don't think he knew why necessarily. But I mean, he really did. I mean, props where props are due. He really worked it into an incredible movie
Right.
with something to say.
Right.
It really does have something to say. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, though.
His job of redoing those movies was so much better than his job that he thought he was doing with Scarface. Remember, War Dogs was like his Scarface.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I forgot that was basically exactly that.
So he did a way better job this go around.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna do the finished puzzle, and then we'll get any closing thoughts that we have. So, finished puzzle, of course, as Taxi Driver and the King of Comedy, and then we talked about Fight Club, American Psycho, High Tension, You Were Never Really Here, Falling Down, Observe and Report, Nightcrawler, God Bless America, Charles Manson interviews, as well as late night talk show interviews with odd guests. Christine Network, Batman, the Killing Joke comic, Throw Mama from the Train, The Assassination of Richard Nixon, A Clockwork Orange, and Natural Born Killers. Yeah. So I'm realizing we haven't said the word society a lot during this. That's actually pretty impressive, guys. I'm very impressed.
You did good.
I gotta say, like, we'll get into some closing thoughts here. I really did love this movie. I know that I was shocked to see, it's got like a 80 or 90% like Rotten Tomato, like for people, but critics, it's like a 60% or something like that. I was pretty surprised that a lot of critics seem to be kind of down on this movie, but it does seem like a lot of like my fellow movie podcasters and people like in that kind of a space, they all really love it. And then just general audiences seem to be loving it, which is surprising. It had a B+ cinema score for a movie this dark and this bleak. It's pretty surprising, but I'm glad that at least, certain segments are really connecting with it.
I agree with you totally. I mean, I love this movie. I have read a lot of critic reviews that they say that it doesn't say anything. Again, I think this movie, it says a lot. I mean, but I think it's really a lot of that is what you read into it. I think that's one of the really cool things about the movie, though, is that you can,
Sure.
and really that kind of comes back to the whole thing with the media, though, because that's what the media projects and puts their own spin of what's happening and feeds it to everybody, and then that's the version that people move forward with. Whereas this, instead of it hand feeding you a message, besides the on the nose, I forget exactly what he says in the movie, but he definitely paraphrases that we live in a society.
Yeah, he basically says that line.
Which that was the one thing I did not like about the movie, is that he said that line so on the nose. But for me, when I watched this movie, I got an anti-gun message, basically a complaint about the mental illness condition, the crisis that basically America has with mental health.
Navigating
also,
that healthcare industry is like just insane. It's
yeah,
awful.
It's even like anti big government. I kind of feel like that Thomas Wayne is kind of a cross between Hillary and Trump. He kind of has a deplorable comment, that's kind of in the vein of what Hillary said. I forget exactly what he said, but he basically insults. What was it he said? But anyway, he basically insulted everybody in Gotham, and I think it's about our bully culture in general that we live in. That all of these things are what I've always, every time there's a mass shooting, I go on and about. This is what the problems are: is these three damn things. But I think it's it really it's like a great piece of art that you can read into it what you want to read into it, and I liked it so much that it surpassed Wonder Woman and Justice League, and it is actually right behind Batman v Superman as my favorite movie that DC's done, even though DC's logo wasn't at the beginning of this film. So.
Chad, are you going to go back and watch other Todd Phillips movies now? I'm curious. Like, are you going to be like watching The Hangover tonight or something?
No.
Probably a good call.
I like I said, I think he doesn't
accidentally made.
Yeah, I do think that.
I think that's a great sum up and such a good note for us to have ended the puzzle pieces on.
Yeah, seriously. One other thing I wanted to mention, and then Ryan, we'll see if you have any last thoughts. But we didn't mention the score from I'm gonna butcher her name, but Hildur Guðnadóttir. I don't know how to say her name, but absolutely one of my favorite scores of the year.
Sound mixing and score was probably my second least favorite part of this, but it was just because of how heavy-handed it was, and I understand that was part of the point, right? Like, he's a guy with mental illness, sensory overload.
Sure.
It's to represent how like overwhelming he is.
Yeah.
Like how overwhelmed things are in his mind. Yeah. But like I at every point felt like there was an orchestra telling me exactly how to feel about what was happening on screen.
Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved that score. What I didn't like as much as the score was some of his needle drops, using Gary Glitter for the dance scene and when I
went on Reddit afterwards, almost every comment was about like, in all those commercials, they were showing him dancing down the stairs. I was not expecting Rock and Roll Part 2 to be the song it was to.
Well, aside from that, any other closing thoughts from you, Ryan?
No, honestly, it's about what I expected it to be. It was decently good. I enjoy pretty much any movie that shows, like any of the Batman movies. I love seeing how people reinterpret Gotham every time. Even within the Christopher Nolan movies, how originally, or I forget in what order, but in some of the Christopher Nolan movies, it's very clearly Chicago, and in some it's very clearly Pittsburgh. I liked seeing this like 70s, very clearly like influenced by New York take on Gotham. I honestly, I'm probably going to start watching the Gotham TV show now because of this, just because like, even if it's not great, I have discovered that I am actually interested in seeing more of this universe beyond just, the guy who dresses up like a bat and punches people in the face kind of thing. It was weird how much this movie did and didn't have a message all at the same time. But I think the main reason that this movie is going to stick with me is just because so many of the movies that it's inspired by, I haven't seen. So that's going to be like, so we were talking about this before the movie, before we started recording, but like, I'm sure there are movies for you guys. You're like, oh, wow, this is just Taxi Driver. But now for me, I'm going to see those movies and be like, wow, this is just Joker, which is like a weird thought that movie's going to stick with me for the rest of my life now as that cultural touchstone. But I would say overall that probably led to me getting more out of the movie than I would have otherwise. Because to me, it's not just a couple cheap homages, because even if it is, I don't know what it was homages to. So it's my first time experiencing that kind of content. So I think that kind of put me in a unique position for this movie, and I don't think that it was a bad thing.
So I have a question, and then we'll wrap this thing up. I got a question for the both of you. Do you think with this, Ryan, you kind of touched on it earlier. You made that comment about being DC's Logan, and do you think that if this does well, which so far, I mean, opening weekend is looking like 90 million, is going to be like the record for October. If this does well, do you think we're going to start to see more superhero movies that push the limits of what a superhero movie can be and like tries different things like this instead of the same old, same old?
I have on this podcast repeatedly, and I will say it again, said that I want to see a very brutal character study of the Hulk as his life just falls apart and he's struggling to keep his shit together. So this movie is the closest I might ever actually get to that wish fulfillment. But I think we've discussed it before. There's in my mind, there's a firm distinction between comic book movies and superhero movies. And I am loving that we are starting to get a better exploration of superhero movies that aren't necessarily in the quote unquote superhero movie genre. Obviously, I would not consider Joker one of those, but I think it's going to open the way for more of those. There are a lot of comic book movies that are not actions that are great. I'm also looking forward to seeing the ones they are still action movies. They are still a little bit of like a cheap blockbuster, but it's not just about let's get the gang together to punch a dude in space in the face kind of thing. There, it's such, as a guy who loves a lot of these things, seeing those as inspirations for unique adaptations, I'm all about it 100%. We're seeing Fox has tried a couple times to do horror stuff. DC has kind of leaned into it a little more with Swamp Thing. There was Brightburn. All these things, even if individually some of them are missteps, I'm thrilled about the direction we are heading with that. And I think it's kind of a natural consequence of the only way that superhero movies can still remain a dominant genre while avoiding burnout. So I think we are going to see more and more of it, both out of necessity and out of the industries are now confident enough that they can like shake it up a little more.
Mm-hmm. I'll say this. I think that the reason we're here is Zack Snyder. I feel that Zack Snyder, from the get-go, has been making superhero movies that were not superhero movies, and that's why people hate them. Watchmen and Batman v Superman are both masterpieces that nobody has yet realized. I think that if without those two movies, we wouldn't be here at this point. Brightburn wouldn't have existed. I think Brightburn was also an amazing movie. I loved it as well. So I think very much, I think this movie was in line with DC. I think the scene where the Waynes get killed, you chop the opening of Batman v Superman in there, and it fits perfect. I think this Joker is much in line with the Lex that we got in Batman v Superman. Of course, you got totally different types of people, but I think the awkwardness, the creepiness, I think is very much in line. Like you could see that in the same universe. That really, this movie, when I got done watching it, I kind of felt like it was like Martin Scorsese done by way of Rob Zombie with M. Night and Zack Snyder. That's kind of the vision I feel, because it's almost like how Rob Zombie does these movies that are like almost like shallow versions of like what Tarantino does, because it's like they're inspired by and rip off all this stuff, but it doesn't go deeper than the original, whereas Tarantino does that. So I think it kind of does that, and then it has all of these twists and turns, and I feel like this is like a better version than Glass, in many ways. Some of the same things get touched on, but yeah, I mean, again, we mentioned all these that where like these movies are going, and we didn't even mention Glass. But I mean, again, I don't think we would have got Glass. Of course, maybe we wouldn't have got the Zack Snyder movies without Unbreakable, because that was definitely the first one.
Sure.
But anyway, so yeah, I think we definitely we're on this track of seeing some really good experimental. I think Birds of Prey is going to be totally different than what people are expecting. I think it's a lot. It's probably going to piss a lot of the comic nerds off, because it looks like it's more comic nerdy, but it's doing its own thing completely. It's making a Harley movie, and it's just basically, it's doing the same thing Joker did in a way, because this isn't really a Joker movie. It's Taxi Driver, and they throw Joker's name on it. This is basically going to be a Harley movie where they throw Birds of Prey's name on it. So,
yeah, I do think, just like you guys, I think we are going to see, a lot of different unique stuff coming out of, these different properties. But, I guess we'll find out. I think that about does it. Yeah. Do you guys have anything you want to plug, each of you?
Oh, I watched Teen Spirit last night. Finally, the Elle Fanning movie.
How'd you like it?
It was pretty good. It's funny when I remember when I first sent the trailer to my sister, she said, "So it's kind of Karate Kid with singing," and it pretty much is.
Nice.
But Elle Fanning can actually sing really good. I think she's kind of the female Taron Egerton. Of course, he's one of my favorite younger actors, and she's like my favorite young actress. But yeah, I thought it was good.
Right on. What about you, Ryan?
So I think my most concerning thing about the fact that I really did like this Joker movie, and previously, I was on the Detective Pikachu episode, is
Sure.
Detective Pikachu and Joker were both ones that were on my list largely because of how batshit and insane they sounded on paper. And so far, I'm 2 out of 2 for that being really good for me. So I can't really plug anything right now because statistically that means Sonic is also going to be good, and I'm not ready for that. I am not prepared for that because Sonic was the third one that I was like, this is so insane on paper. There's no way it'll work, but they just might pull it off. So I think I am now just going to terms with the fact that this is going to be a hat trick of insanity, and that Sonic is going to come out in like 5 months and be amazing, and I don't know what I'm going to do with myself in a world where all of those movies ended up being good. I'm just not prepared for it.
You're like a good luck Clover. Is that a thing?
Yeah, 4-leaf clover. That's good luck.
I don't think Sonic's going to be good. So.
It's going to rule.
I can't imagine it will, but it's gonna somehow, and
it's funny because I remember when we talked about this movie. I mean, I thought this was going to be like The Room, the Room, DC movie. I thought it was going to be so horrible. Which now that I think about it, I mean. Joaquin, he is just so good. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I guess you can just kind of throw him in anything, and he'll, if it was Nick Cage or somebody like that, then I guess this one would have collapsed around the emptiness of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I would love to if we're pretty much done here, I would love to end on one closing thought for you guys. A question.
Sure.
Do you think anyone told Todd Phillips that Martin Scorsese stopped being a producer on this movie? Did he maybe just not realize? Because if you've got Martin Scorsese executive producing your project, and presumably he goes, hey man, huge influence, just so you know, I am going to rip off 2 of your movies and put the Joker in them. And then suddenly Martin Scorsese halfway through production dropped out as a producer. And I'm just genuinely curious if maybe everyone was like, don't tell Todd.
Follow-up question, was it just Bradley Cooper in a Martin Scorsese costume?
Well,
that's why he thought
that's what I was going to say. Maybe Scorsese was never involved. Because, remember early on, they were talking that this was going to star Leo. And maybe Leo was never involved, and maybe Scorsese was never involved. I don't know.
I like to imagine that this whole movie is just a horrible prank that Bradley Cooper was playing on Joaquin Phoenix that has backfired terrifically. That he was like, yeah, fuck it, get the Hangover guy, sure, yeah, that'll be good, Joaquin. And then it ends up working, and now he's just sitting there being like,
well, I think next year, maybe not Sonic. But I think we should reconvene for a trilogy of episodes with us. What do you guys think?
Sure.
It'll be quite a showdown.
Awesome. Yes, it will.
Yeah, none of us mentioned showdown.
That's for the best.
This is Todd from iHeartGeek. We believe that anything you're passionate about is geek. And if you are a geek, you are family here. We record once a week and would love to have you join in our conversations. You can get hold of us at www.iheartgeekshow.com. Use the .com, we paid extra for it. You can get us at Twitter at iHeartGeekShow. And you can always search us on our Facebook page as well. And keep on geeking on.
All right, so that does it for today's episode of Piecing It Together. Hope you enjoyed that conversation about Joker. Were there any puzzle pieces we missed? I mean, we got into quite a few. Chad brought up some really random ones, and Ryan had a bunch, and of course, we hit the big ones. But if we missed any, let us know. You could always email us piecingpod@allpointswest.net. You can just tweet at us at piecingpod or join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces and just get in touch and chat with us about what movies you thought inspired Joker. We would love to hear more from you guys that are out there listening and get you all involved with the show. So that does it for today. I want to remind you, as always, to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts because it does help. We recently have been in the top 100 film review podcast for the past couple weeks now, and that is just awesome. I can't tell you how excited that is for me, and I want to just keep making the show better and keep getting out to more and more listeners, and I want to thank you all for listening. Speaking of which, we just hit 1,000 followers on Twitter. A bunch of awesome people out there helped make it happen on my birthday on Friday, so thank you guys for helping make that happen. Again, I just want to keep getting this show heard and get it out to as many people as possible, so thanks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being out there. Let's leave you with a piece of music, and we might as well leave you with one that I know I've played multiple times before on the show, but it goes with the Joker for sure, and that is the track Cut Open from my album An Unseen Sky. Enjoy this piece of music, and we will be back with more Piecing It Together coming up real soon.
and all points west.